My name is Celine. I'm 50 years old, and last month I learned that the woman who raised me had quietly taken the $75,000 refund my college owed me. I never imagined I'd return to college at 50. For most of my life, it felt like a dream meant for other people. People who weren't juggling two jobs, aging parents, and the weight of a marriage that ended far too soon. When my husband passed away, grief consumed me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I spent months drifting through each day, completing tasks on automatic, barely able to understand how the world kept moving when mine had shattered. But out of that darkness came a strange, unexpected spark. The realization that if I didn't change the direction of my life now, I never would. So, I enrolled. A part-time program, nights and weekends, at the college I'd once hoped to attend as a teenager. I used the last of my husband's life insurance to pay for tuition up front, a decision that felt both terrifying and hopeful. Every step on campus made me feel like I was rebuilding myself, slowly, painfully, but intentionally. My mother, Honora, never quite understood that. She viewed education as a luxury, not an investment. She'd always been practical to a fault, sometimes cruelly so. When I told her about going back to school, she didn't congratulate me. She didn't even pretend to be supportive. Instead, she sighed and said, "At your age? What for?" Still, she was my mother, and like every daughter craving approval she'll never get, I kept trying. When the college contacted me about an account audit and explained that I had significantly overpaid, I was shocked. I didn't fully understand how tuition adjustments worked, only that my file was being reviewed due to a departmental change, and I might be receiving a refund of some sort. I thought it might be a few $100s, maybe a couple thousand if I was lucky. I never expected to hear the number $75,000. I remember sitting at my tiny kitchen table, staring at the email over and over, convinced it had to be a mistake. I reread the message until my eyes blurred. I paced. I laughed nervously. I even called the office just to confirm that, yes, the audit had found overpayment from insurance distributions, outdated fee structures, and a misapplied scholarship credit. And yes, the refund amount was correct. It felt unreal, life-changing, terrifying. But then another emotion crept in: fear. Managing that kind of money wasn't something I'd ever done before. I worried about messing it up, losing the paperwork, missing a deadline, or making some mistake that would disqualify me from receiving it. I was overwhelmed, completely and utterly overwhelmed. And in that vulnerable moment, I turned to the person I thought I could trust, my mother. She had always been the financially savvy one in the family, or at least she proclaimed herself to be. She handled the bills when my father was alive, the insurance paperwork after he passed, and even took over my grandmother's estate. She spoke the language of money with a confidence I never had. So when I told her about the refund and my anxiety about the process, she immediately said, "Let me manage it. These institutions make everything complicated. I know how to get things done." I hesitated. I truly did. Something in me knew better, but that buried instinct was faint compared to the exhaustion I lived with every day: work, classes, grief. I convinced myself that letting her help would reduce my stress. She reassured me repeatedly, "Just sign the authorization form. I'll take care of the rest." So I gave her access. And then I waited. At first, I didn't worry. Things like this, I assumed, took weeks, maybe months. But after a while, something felt off. The college had said the refund would be issued within a specific time frame, yet the deadline came and went. Every time I asked my mother if she'd heard anything, she dismissed me with the same airy line: "These things take time, Celine. Bureaucracy always moves slowly." I wanted to believe her. I really did. After all, she'd handled so many things before. She was experienced, efficient, confident. And she sounded so certain every time she spoke about it that questioning her felt ungrateful or paranoid. But the unease kept growing, like a faint vibration under my skin. At night, I'd lie in bed thinking about the refund, about what it meant for my future, how it could ease my financial burden, allow me to finish school without drowning in loans, or maybe even give me a small cushion to breathe for the first time in years. But every time I tried to imagine it, something inside me tightened. A whisper in the back of my mind kept asking, "Why hasn't she shown you any updates? Why hasn't she forwarded any emails? Why haven't you seen any paperwork?" Still, I pushed those thoughts away, ashamed of my suspicion. She was my mother. She was helping me. Why would she ever? One evening, after a long shift followed by a late class, I came home exhausted and frustrated. I'd received a generic college announcement earlier that day about updated financial portals, urging students to check their accounts. I'd ignored it at first. My mother was handling things after all, but the reminder lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. I sat down at my computer, rubbed my temples, and told myself I just wanted to see the updated interface. That was all. Just curiosity, just a glance. Not checking up on her, not doubting her. My hands felt strangely heavy as I typed in my login credentials. The portal took longer than usual to load, spinning and spinning, and for a moment I almost clicked out, telling myself it was pointless. But then the dashboard appeared. The page looked normal at first. Course listings, announcements, the usual clutter. I navigated to the Financial Activity tab, each click echoing in my chest like a heartbeat. And there it was, a single line of text that made the room tilt around me. Refund status, paid recipient, Honora Melling, authorized manager. I stared at the name, my mother's name, bold, unequivocal, stamped on the money that was meant for me. My breath caught in my throat, sharp and painful, as though the air itself had turned to glass. The world felt suddenly smaller, colder, tighter, because nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment I saw her name listed under refund recipient. The moment I clicked financial activity, my stomach dropped. The refund had already been processed. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The word paid glared back at me from the screen, bright and indifferent, as if it weren't announcing the disappearance of the most important sum of money I'd ever been owed. I blinked, hoping it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. I even logged out and back in, hands trembling so badly I mistyped my password twice. But no matter what I did, the page didn't change. The status didn't change. The name didn't change. Recipient, Honora Melling, authorized manager. My mother, not me, not even our shared home address. Just her name, alone, where mine should have been. A cold wave of nausea rolled up my spine. Every instinct inside me rebelled, screaming that something was terribly, terribly wrong. My mother had no reason, no permission, no need, to be listed anywhere near that money. I had never authorized that. I knew I hadn't. We never even filled out any forms together. I simply told her I was overwhelmed, and she promised she'd handle the calls. Not once had she asked me to sign anything. So how had she gotten onto my account? With a growing sense of dread, I clicked the Account Authorizations tab. It wasn't a place I'd ever looked before because I never imagined I'd need to. The log loaded slowly, line by line, until one entry caught my eye. Authorization added. Honora Melling. Type. Financial manager. Verification. Digital signature on file digital signature. I felt my lips part in disbelief. I hadn't signed anything digitally. I wouldn't even know where to find the form. My hands grew cold as I clicked on the details, and there it was. A sloppy, incorrect replica of my signature. My first name barely legible, my last name misspelled, as if someone had tried to imitate it from memory. Someone. My mother. I leaned back in my chair slowly, pressing a hand to my mouth as a sickening clarity settled over me. She had forged my authorization. She had accessed my account. She had taken the refund. And for weeks, no, months, she had lied to my face with that calm, maternal authority she wielded like a blade. For a long moment, all I could do was sit there, staring at the grotesque mockery of my signature. A faint ringing filled my ears, the kind that comes from shock or heartbreak or both. I felt cold and hot at the same time, unable to make sense of how quickly the ground beneath me had shifted. Then, finally, my survival instincts kicked in. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and dialed the financial office number listed on the portal. My voice cracked when the call connected, but the woman on the other end, someone named Janelle, spoke in a calm, professional tone that grounded me just enough to keep going. I explained that I was confused about my refund status, that I hadn't received any payment, despite the portal saying it was processed. There was silence as she looked up my account. Silence long enough for my heart to pound against my ribs like a drum. Then she said the words that confirmed everything. Yes, The refund was mailed out 3 weeks ago to the authorized family manager on file. It was sent to an address listed for, let me check, yes, and Honora Melling. I swallowed hard. That's my mother. I never authorized that. I never signed anything. Janelle sounded sympathetic. I can only tell you what's recorded on our end. The authorization was submitted electronically with a matching signature. If that signature wasn't yours, you may want to file a fraud dispute. Fraud? The word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I thanked her in a daze I could barely remember. When I hung up, my hand was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I stared at the wall, trying to make sense of what had happened. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't bureaucracy. This wasn't a delay. This was betrayal. Calculated, intentional betrayal. $75,000, money that could have secured my education, my future, my independence, had been redirected by the person I trusted most, without hesitation, without remorse, without even telling me. I opened my text messages and typed, "Me. Mom, I just checked the portal. It says the refund was already paid. Why did it go to you?" I watched the typing dots appear almost instantly, and yet her response was chillingly casual. "Mom, I'm busy right now. We'll talk later." Talk later. Talk later? I felt a sharp stab of disbelief. That was her reaction to being caught with $75,000 that didn't belong to her? As if this were about scheduling, not theft? For the first time in my life, I saw my mother clearly. Not as the stern, capable woman who'd handled the family's finances for decades, not as the person I'd tried so hard to impress, but as someone who believed, deeply, that she was entitled to anything I had. Every memory of her dismissing my worries, belittling my choices, controlling my decisions, every one of them resurfaced with brutal clarity. She'd always believed she knew what was best, and in her mind, what was best was whatever gave her the most power. The realization settled like a stone in my stomach. She had always been this way. I had just never wanted to see it. I stood up from my desk, pacing my living room as panic and anger twisted inside me. I felt violated, foolish, furious, heartbroken, emotions clashing and crashing until I could barely breathe. The refund wasn't just money, it was possibility, it was security, it was my second chance at life. And she had stolen it. I picked up my phone again, staring at her dismissive message. A part of me wanted to run straight to her house and demand she give it back right then and there. But another part, quiet, trembling, but resolute, told me to slow down. Think. Be strategic. Document everything. Don't let her twist the narrative like she always had. So I took a deep breath and began gathering screenshots. The refund page, the authorization log, the forged signature, the transaction timestamp. I backed everything up in multiple places. Then I sat down, closed my eyes, and tried to steady the shaking in my hands. I was going to confront her, and this time I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my keys, my heart hammered, my throat tightened. But I walked out the door anyway. But when I finally confronted her, she didn't deny it. She justified it. My mother crossed her arms and told me the money was better off in her hands. When I pulled into my mother's driveway, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. Her house looked the same as it always had. Neat hedges, spotless windows, the wind chime she'd had since my childhood tinkling faintly in the breeze. But the familiarity only made my emotions twist tighter. I wasn't coming as a daughter dropping by. I was coming as someone who'd been stolen from, lied to, manipulated. I was coming for answers. I walked up the porch steps and knocked harder than I intended. She opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Her face was calm, too calm. It made my skin crawl. "Celine," she said flatly, not even a trace of surprise. "You shouldn't look so upset. Come in." I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of lemon cleaner. Everything was immaculate, rigid, like her. I didn't bother sitting. "Why did you take my refund?" She closed the door with deliberate slowness, then turned to me with an expression that belonged on a disappointed schoolteacher, not a mother caught stealing $75,000. "I didn't take anything," she said, using air quotes. "I moved it where it would be used responsibly." Responsibly. The word made my jaw clench. You forged my signature, I said. You accessed my account. You stole the money. She waved a hand dismissively. Stop being dramatic. I protected you. That amount of money would overwhelm you. You'd waste it. You've never been good with finances, Selene. You know that. I stood there, stunned at the ease with which she reframed her theft as a favor, as if I should thank her. And besides, she continued with a sigh, you're too old for college anyway. Why throw money into something that won't lead anywhere? You need stability, not fantasies. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, but sharply, like a small bone finally giving under years of weight. Too old. Fantasies. Not leading anywhere. She hadn't even bothered pretending her actions were accidental or misunderstood. She believed what she said. She believed the money should be hers. I paid that tuition with my husband's insurance, I said, my voice shaking. This refund was supposed to help me rebuild my life. It's mine. You had no right. She lifted her chin. I intend to invest it, properly, not blow it on some late-life hobby masquerading as education. My breath stuttered. Where is the money now? That's none of your concern. I stared at her, unable to fully process her audacity. It's my refund. It's entirely my concern. No, she countered. You are my child. Everything you have comes from me, and if I decide to manage something for you, you should be grateful. She leaned back proudly, arms crossed. I know what's best. I always have. Her words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were surprising, but because they were so familiar. I had lived my entire life trying to prove I could handle myself, make my own decisions, have my own wants. And yet here she was, reducing me again to a helpless extension of herself, as if I existed to be managed. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls too close. My breath came shallow. You stole from me, I whispered, voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. You stole my chance to rebuild. She narrowed her eyes. Lower your voice. You're being emotional. This is why I had to step in. Someone had to be responsible. Responsible? I choked out. You committed fraud. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please, don't use legal words you don't understand. A sharp, painful heat rose in my chest. She wasn't just dismissing my feelings. She was dismissing reality itself. She had rewritten the narrative in her head and expected me to fall in line the way I always had. Not this time. You need to return the money, I said, forcing my voice to steady. I will decide what happens to it, she replied coolly. Something inside me hardened. I realized then that my mother would never admit wrongdoing, not because she didn't know what she'd done, but because she believed her actions were justified by her entitlement. She believed my life belonged to her. I'm done talking, I said, backing toward the door. But I'm not done with this. Her expression shifted for the first time, anger flickering behind her composure. If you make a scene, you'll regret it, she warned. I already do. I walked out before she could say anything else, slamming the door behind me, my hands shaking as I descended the porch steps. The air outside felt shockingly cold, sharp enough to sting. I made it to my car before the tears finally came, not soft, trembling ones, but hot, furious ones that blurred my vision and burned my throat. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. It wasn't just the theft, it was everything behind it. The control, the superiority, the absolute certainty that she owned me. This wasn't only financial abuse, it was emotional imprisonment, and I had lived in its shadow my entire life. When I finally pulled away from her house, the sky was dimming, the early evening light fading into blue-gray. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying every word she'd said, every lie, every justification. By the time I reached my driveway, my heartbreak had crystallized into determination. I needed proof. I needed documentation. I needed to build a wall of evidence so strong she couldn't twist her way out of it. So I spent hours gathering everything. Screenshots, call logs, copies of emails, the forged signature, even notes from our conversations. I organized them into folders, digital and physical. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to be silent this time. Just after midnight, as I sat surrounded by papers and files, my phone buzzed on the table. The vibration startled me in the quiet room. I looked down, expecting it to be my mother. But it wasn't. It was a message from an unexpected source. It was my cousin Dara, and she'd seen something I needed to know. When I saw Dara's name light up my phone that night, I hesitated. We weren't exactly close. Growing up, we saw each other at holidays and the occasional birthday, but we moved in different directions as adults. Dara was the kind of woman who always seemed to know what was happening in the family before anyone else did. Partly because she listened, and partly because people tended to talk around her without realizing she was paying attention. Her message was brief, almost cryptic. Dara, Celine, I overheard something you probably need to know. Can we talk? My chest tightened. I typed back immediately. Me. What is it about? Dara, your mom, and the refund money. For a moment, everything inside me went still. I swallowed hard and typed, me, call me. She did. The moment I heard her voice, uneasy, hesitant, I knew whatever she had to say wasn't going to help me sleep that night. Celine, she began cautiously, I'm not trying to get involved in anything, but I was at Aunt Miriam's house tonight. Your mom was there, and she was talking about you. Loudly. My stomach twisted. What did she say? Dara exhaled slowly, as if choosing her words with care. She said she rescued you from making a huge mistake. She told everyone you were about to ruin your finances, and she stepped in before you did something stupid. I closed my eyes. My mother's narrative, her favorite fiction. She said she had to take control, Dara continued, because you didn't know what you were doing with such a large amount, and she made it sound, I don't know, like the money was hers now, like she deserved it for keeping you on track all these years. Heat surged up my spine. It's not hers, I said through clenched teeth. She stole it. I figured, Dara said softly. Honestly, the way she talked, it sounded rehearsed, and she wasn't even hiding it. That's what bothered me. She wasn't whispering. She was bragging. My throat tightened. Did she say anything about where the money is? A pause. Then Dara said carefully, I think she spent some of it. The room spun. I gripped the edge of my table. How do you know? Because she said something about allocating funds and settling obligations. She was vague, but the tone was not hypothetical. I forced myself to breathe. Dara, can we meet somewhere? Just us? Of course, she said without hesitation. Tomorrow morning? We agreed on a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I barely slept that night. My mind raced with every possible scenario, every fear, every memory of my mother bending the truth, bending me, until I couldn't tell where she ended and I began. By the time I arrived at the meeting place the next day, my nerves were frayed. Dara was already there, sitting at a corner table with a folder in front of her. Seeing her made something inside me loosen a little. She looked concerned, not curious, not amused, just genuinely concerned. I brought this, she said, sliding the folder toward me. I thought it might help. Inside were screenshots of texts between relatives discussing my mother's boasting. Voice memos recorded from across the room. Snippets of conversation in which my mother described the refund as something she'd redirected for safety. There was even an audio clip of her laughing, saying, Celine doesn't understand big decisions. Never has. Each word felt like a knife. Dara. Thank you, I whispered, voice trembling despite my efforts. She nodded. I know we're not super close, but I've always liked you. And I've always known how your mom talks about you. I just never thought she'd do something like this. I swallowed hard. I think she has a secret account. The college told me the refund was mailed to her address, but she wouldn't tell me where the money went. Dara leaned in. She does have one. I've heard whispers about it for years. Some sort of private account she uses whenever she doesn't want people to know how much she has. My heart dropped. How do you know that? My friend Priya works at a bank, she said. Your mom once tried to open a joint account with Aunt Miriam, but Priya was the one handling the paperwork. She told me, privately, that Honora had multiple accounts in her name, some with pretty significant movement. Movement? I echoed. Like what? Like transfers, deposits, withdrawals, money that didn't match her reported income. Dara hesitated. Priya couldn't say much, obviously. There are Laws. But she hinted your mom's financial life isn't as simple as she pretends. A spark ignited inside me. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of hope. Priya could help. Not illegally, not by revealing private information, but by guiding me, by showing me what to look for, how to trace what happened to my money. Do you think she'd talk to me? I asked. Dara nodded firmly. If I call her first, yes. She's cautious, but she's kind, and she hates when people abuse financial systems. For the first time in days, I felt the faintest sense of direction. A pathway, a chance to uncover the truth, not just react to it. We spent the next hour going through everything Dara had collected. She didn't push opinions on me. She didn't tell me what I should do. She simply listened, asked questions, and offered quiet, steady support, something I hadn't realized I'd needed so desperately. Before we left, she touched my arm gently. Celine, whatever happens, you're not alone in this. I'll help you however I can. Her words broke something open in me, something my mother had kept caged for years. The belief that asking for help was weakness, that trusting others was dangerous. Dara's sincerity cut through all that. Thank you, I said, truly meaning it. That afternoon, she called Priya, explained the situation in careful, vague terms, and handed the phone to me. Priya's voice was warm, steady, and professional. She told me she couldn't access my mother's accounts, but she could tell me what steps to take to trace funds, what documentation I needed, and how to structure a formal inquiry if fraud was involved. She offered to meet with me privately, off the record, to explain the process. We arranged a time. She promised to help me understand every option I had. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began: control. But that feeling didn't last long, because when I met with Priya, she uncovered something even worse. My mother had done this before. Priya looked at me and said, Celine, this pattern isn't new. Your mother has a history. When I walked into Priya's small office, tucked inside the corner of a modest financial, I felt anxious but determined. She greeted me with a warm handshake and a gentle smile that eased some of my tension. Her demeanor was calm and methodical, exactly what I needed. She motioned for me to sit, and once we were both settled, she folded her hands on the desk and spoke in a tone that was soft but unwavering. Before we begin, she said, I need you to understand that I can't legally access private accounts or share confidential information, but I can help you interpret what's publicly visible, advise you on financial procedures, and tell you what steps to take next. I nodded, bracing myself. She pulled up some public financial records, transaction traces, and authorization logs that anyone could request. Nothing invasive, just enough to reveal patterns, the kind of patterns most people never think to look for. She took her time explaining each document, pointing out clues, and then she showed me something that made my blood run cold. A history of authorizations, requests filed years earlier, where my mother had added herself as a financial manager on accounts that didn't belong to her. Not mine, not just mine anyway. They belonged to relatives, people I recognized, people who trusted her. Priya tapped the screen lightly. This authorization structure is identical to the one she used on your account. Same type of delegation, same digital signature process. And from what I can see publicly, she's been listed this way several times before. I felt myself go still. She did this to other family members? Priya hesitated. I can't say exactly what happened with their funds, but the access was there, and the pattern. Celine, this isn't the first time. A heavy silence filled the room. I stared at the documents, unable to breathe for a moment. My mother's name appeared again and again like a watermark of betrayal, a pattern of financial control disguised as helping. Priya continued in that steady, careful voice. There's more. I pulled public probate filings after you mentioned your late aunt. Her estate reports show irregular withdrawals during hospice care. Whoever handled her finances had access to her account. I felt a jolt deep in my chest. My mother took money from her. Priya didn't answer directly. She couldn't, but she placed another document in front of me, showing dates and amounts. The movement was unmistakable. It aligned with the period when my aunt was bedridden, unable to manage anything herself. My throat tightened painfully. I had loved my aunt. She had been gentle, soft-spoken, and often slipped me quiet encouragement behind my mother's back. She deserved dignity. She deserved protection. Instead, It looked like she had been preyed upon, and I hadn't known. None of us had. Priya leaned forward slightly. Celine, I don't want to overwhelm you, but this is serious. You need to start gathering formal documentation immediately. Emails, screenshots, logs, dates, anything tied to the refund. I nodded numbly. I've already started. Good, she said gently. What you're dealing with isn't a misunderstanding. It's a repeated behavior. If you want this resolved legally and safely, evidence is everything. I swallowed, but the lump in my throat wouldn't budge. Why didn't I see it? I whispered. Priya regarded me with a look that felt both kind and knowing. Because people don't expect betrayal from those they love, especially a parent. I felt tears prick behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I ignored so many red flags. Her controlling behavior, the way she always needed to approve everything, the constant comments about my decisions. And now this. Guilt hit me like a wave. Not guilt for her actions, she alone owned that, but guilt for allowing myself to believe her narratives for so many years, for giving her access to me, my life, my trust. Priya's voice softened. Guilt is natural, but it isn't helpful right now. Focus on what you can do next. She was right, and I knew exactly who could help. That afternoon, I called Dara, who immediately offered to assist. I'll talk to everyone, she said. People have stories about your mom. They always have. They just never connected the dots. True enough. Within a day, she had already collected notes from relatives who remembered instances of my mother stepping in uninvited to manage financial situations. Each small account of interference, alone insignificant, together formed a disturbing picture. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was a deliberate, practiced strategy of control. The realization shook me, and yet strangely, it also strengthened me. If this was who my mother really was, and who she had been for years, then I wasn't fighting a single incident. I was fighting a pattern, a history. I needed legal help. So I contacted a legal aid attorney named Reina, recommended by a coworker who had gone through financial disputes with her own parent. When Reina answered the phone, her voice was crisp and businesslike, but not unkind. I explained everything, slowly, carefully, making sure not to miss a detail. When I finished, she hummed thoughtfully. Celine, she said, you have the foundation of a strong case here. Fraud, unauthorized access, digital forgery, misappropriation of funds. These are serious claims, but you must be thorough. Documentation is key. I'm gathering everything, I told her. Every log, every screenshot, every message. Good. That will help us build undeniable proof. And once we file, your mother will be forced to respond formally. My stomach tightened at that thought. Formal? Legal? Public? I knew it was necessary. I knew it was right. But the emotional weight of pursuing action against my own mother felt almost unbearable. Rena must have sensed my hesitation, because her next words were careful. Before we proceed, she said gently, I need to ask you something important. Something you need to answer honestly. I gripped the phone tighter. Are you prepared, she asked, for what exposing your mother will destroy? Her question landed in the center of my chest, heavy and devastating, and it shook me to the core. Rena leaned forward and asked, Are you prepared for what exposing your mother will destroy? Her question hit me harder than anything I'd heard in weeks. Until that moment, I had focused on facts, numbers, signatures, authorization law, cold, clinical evidence that proved what my mother had done. But Rena's words opened a door I had been trying desperately to keep closed. Was I prepared? Prepared to shatter whatever fragile remnants of family we had left? Prepared to become the daughter who turned her own mother in? Prepared to watch relatives choose sides? Prepared to face the tidal wave of guilt that would follow? The truth was, I didn't know. I sat there in Rena's small office, my hands clasped in my lap, fingers trembling. The room felt too quiet, the air too still, as if even it waited for my answer. I don't want to destroy my family, I whispered. Rena's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained steady. You're not destroying anything, Celine. The destruction began the moment your mother stole your refund. You're responding to what she set into motion. My throat tightened. I looked down, unable to hold her gaze. All my life, I had carried the fear of upsetting my mother, fear of her disappointment, her judgment, her anger. Even at 50 years old, that fear still lived in me like a stubborn shadow. Memory after memory flickered through my mind. Her telling me what clothes I should wear because I couldn't be trusted to choose flattering ones. Her insisting on reading every school assignment before I turned it in. Her correcting me in front of relatives when I spoke too confidently. Her deciding what I really wanted before I even said the words myself. Her telling me I never thought things through, even when I did. Control disguised as care, authority disguised as love. For so long, I believed that was normal. I swallowed hard and whispered, "She always made me feel like I needed her permission for everything." Even now, part of me is terrified of angering her. Rena's voice softened. "That's exactly why she thought she could do this, because she assumed you'd stay silent." I closed my eyes, the truth settling painfully into place. She was right. Silence was what my mother expected from me. Compliance, submission, not anymore. Rena continued, "If we move forward, the legal steps are straightforward, though emotionally challenging. I'll walk you through them." I nodded slowly, bracing myself. "First," she said, "we file a fraud report with the college. They have a responsibility to investigate unauthorized access and misdirected funds. This will prompt their internal review. Second, we file a financial misappropriation complaint with local authorities. The forged signature alone is significant evidence. Third, you can pursue civil action for reimbursement, damages, or both. And considering the sum involved, I strongly recommend that route." Each word felt heavier than the last. This wasn't just a dispute. It was a war I never asked for, but one I had no choice but to fight. Rena paused, letting it sink in. "This process will be disruptive, emotionally draining. It may reveal things about your mother that will be hard to accept, but it will also protect you, and potentially others." The word echoed in my mind. I thought of my aunt, her dwindling estate, her quiet trust, and the withdrawals that didn't add up. I thought of the other relatives whose accounts my mother had accessed. How many of them never realized something was off? How many brushed it aside because it was just Honora being helpful? How many times had she done this? The realization made something inside me shift. This wasn't only about me anymore. This was about a pattern she'd repeat unless someone forced her to stop. I needed to talk to Dara. That evening we sat at her kitchen table, cups of tea growing cold between us. When I told her about Rena's question, Dara didn't hesitate. "You can't let fear protect her," she said firmly. "She doesn't fear hurting you. She doesn't fear taking from you. And she will do it again to someone else if you don't stop her." I stared at the table, letting her words settle. They were blunt, but they were true. "I don't want to be the reason the family fractures," I murmured. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Celine, your mother fractured the family a long time ago. She just did it quietly, in ways no one wanted to talk about." Her support steadied me. For the first time, I felt the fear loosening its hold. Not disappearing, but loosening. Enough for me to breathe. "I'm going forward with it," I whispered, the decision forming fully at last. Dara nodded, proud and relieved. "Good. I'll help however I can." The next morning, I met with Rena again. This time I didn't hesitate. We drafted the official fraud complaint together, outlining every detail chronologically: my enrollment, the payment history, the audit, the unauthorized digital signature, the misdirected refund, the confrontation. Then came the final piece of evidence: the signature. I'd brought a copy of my real signature from a college document and placed it beside the forged one. The difference was undeniable, unmistakable. Rena photographed the comparison, stamped it, and attached it to the file. "This is strong," she said. "Very strong." I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, not fear, but something like readiness. The kind of readiness that comes after years of being pushed into silence. When everything was prepared, Rena handed me the folder. "It's time," she said gently, and so I submitted it, first to the college, then to the authorities. It felt surreal, standing there, filing paperwork that would formally accuse my mother of fraud, but it also felt necessary, right, like reclaiming something that had been stolen long before the refund ever existed. I walked out of the building, feeling emotionally drained but strangely lighter, as if for the first time in years I had taken control of my own life. But peace didn't last, because 2 days later, as I was making dinner, there was a thunderous knock on my door, one filled with rage and urgency. I froze. My mother showed up at my door, furious. She pounded on my door, screaming that I owed her the money. The pounding shook the door so hard I thought it might splinter. 3 violent thuds, then a fourth, and a voice. My mother's voice, sharp, furious, echoing through the hallway of my small home. "Celine, open this door right now." A chill ran straight through me. I froze in the middle of my kitchen, wooden spoon still in my hand, heart hammering against my ribs. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like being a child again, trapped, intimidated, bracing myself for the storm I knew would come. Then she pounded again. "You owe me that money. Do you hear me? You owe me." Her voice was so loud it rattled the picture frames on the wall. I set the spoon down, wiped my palms on my jeans, and forced myself to walk to the door. Every instinct screamed at me to stay silent, to hide, to wait for her to leave. But I wasn't that child anymore. I wasn't powerless, not this time. I unlocked the door, but kept the chain on. She shoved from the other side the moment she heard the click, but the chain held firm. Her face came into view, red, twisted with rage, eyes blazing in a way I had only seen glimpses of in childhood arguments and whispered criticisms. "What are you doing?" I demanded, voice trembling but audible. "You can't come here like this." "Don't you dare lecture me," she snapped, slamming her palm against the door again. "You ungrateful child. How could you? Calling lawyers, filing complaints. You think you can do that to me?" Yes, I thought. I can, and I have to. "I want the money back," I said. "All of it." "You don't deserve it," she shrieked. "I took it because you would have wasted it. I saved you, Celine. I saved you." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself, then opened the door fully, just enough for her to step inside if she tried, but also enough for the phone in my pocket to capture everything. I had hit record the moment I heard her screaming. Rena had advised me to gather evidence, and here it was unfolding in front of me, raw and ugly. My mother pushed forward, but I stood my ground. "You need to leave," I said. "We're not doing this." She scoffed. "Oh, we're doing this. You're going to withdraw those complaints. Do you understand me? Withdraw them." "No." She stared at me as if I had slapped her. Her face contorted, rage shifting into something darker, something cold. "If you don't cancel them," she said in a low, threatening tone, "you'll be cut off, completely, from the entire family. I'll make sure everyone knows how ungrateful you are." I swallowed hard, but I didn't back down. If they believe that, they never cared about me in the first place. "You selfish little—" She stopped herself, looking me up and down with pure disdain. "You wouldn't even have the chance to go to college if it weren't for me. Everything you have, everything you are, is because I sacrificed for you." There it was, the guilt trip, the weapon she'd polished for decades. I might have fallen for it once. I might have cried, apologized, begged for forgiveness for things that weren't even my fault. But now, after everything she'd done? No. "I'm 50 years old," I said quietly. "Your sacrifices don't justify stealing from me." She lunged a step closer, jabbing a finger toward my face. "I use that money for real things, adult things, things that matter. I paid off debts, bills. I put it where it could actually do some good." My stomach lurched. "You spent it?" Her expression flickered just long enough to confirm everything. "You had no right," I whispered, voice cracking under the weight of it. "You wouldn't have used it properly," she snapped. "You were going to throw it away on classes and books and nonsense." It was my refund. "I deserved it," she screamed, so loudly the sound echoed down the hall. Something inside me, something brittle and tired, finally broke. Years of swallowed hurt, minimized anger, unspoken boundaries, all of it came rising to the surface. "No," I said firmly. "You stole it. You forged my signature. You lied, and you're not talking your way out of it." Her jaw tightened. She reached out suddenly, gripping my arm, nails digging into my skin. "Withdraw those filings, Celine, right now, or I swear you'll regret it." I jerked my arm free. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." The threat stunned her. For a split second, she looked almost afraid. Then her expression hardened again. "You think you're brave?" she hissed. "You think you're going to win? You are nothing without me. I made you, and I can unmake you." "That's enough," I said, stepping back and pointing to the door. "Leave." She stood there, breathing heavily, eyes burning through me. Then, with a bitter, venomous scoff, she turned on her heel. "You'll regret this," she spat over her shoulder. "I'll make sure of it." The door slammed so hard the frame shook. For several long seconds, I stood motionless, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps down the walkway and the roar of her car engine as she sped away. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but I was still standing. I locked the door, slid down against it, and forced myself to breathe. Slow, steady, deliberate. Then I remembered the recording. I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed stop, and saved the file. My hands trembled as I forwarded it to Rena with a brief message. "Me." She confronted me. "Here's the recording." I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The audio said everything. I set the phone down and stared at the wall for what felt like a long time, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. The following morning, as sunlight streamed across my living room, a notification pinged on my phone. I picked it up, expecting a message from Rena, but it wasn't from her. It was an email from the college. The investigation was complete. The college concluded that my refund was stolen and that the authorization was fraudulent. The email sat at the top of my inbox, bold and urgent, as if it knew the weight it carried. My pulse quickened as I tapped it open. It wasn't long, not a long explanation, not a complicated decision. The message was concise, clinical, and devastatingly clear. After internal review, we have determined that the $75,000 refund was misdirected through unauthorized access to your student account. The digital signature on file does not match enrollment records. Authorization is invalid. The refund recipient was not verified. My breath caught. We will reissue the full amount directly to you. All secondary access to your account has been revoked. This matter has been forwarded to the district attorney due to evidence of digital fraud and identity misrepresentation. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Everything felt too quiet, too surreal. I read the message again, slower this time, letting each line sink in. It was vindication. Official, documented proof that I hadn't imagined anything, that I wasn't overreacting, that the violation I felt was real. But relief didn't come all at once. It arrived in staggered breaths, tangled with grief, shock, and something that almost resembled mourning. Because even though this validated everything I had suspected and discovered, it also confirmed something I wished weren't true. My mother did this, fully, knowingly, without hesitation. I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. The room felt different, as if the air itself had shifted. I exhaled shakily, then grabbed my phone to forward the email to Rena. Her reply came within minutes. "Rena, this is exactly what we needed. The case is strong. We'll proceed with the next steps. The next steps. Legal steps. Criminal steps." My stomach twisted. I knew this was necessary. Justice, accountability, closure, but none of it felt triumphant. It felt like standing on a cliffside during a storm, knowing the only... Not long after, the calls began. At first, I didn't answer. Unknown number. Another. I ignored them all. They were telemarketers. But when my phone buzzed again and I leaned over to silence it, I saw a familiar... I hesitated before answering. Her voice was tight and uneasy. "Celine, your mother just called me. She's saying you're accusing her of serious... that you're trying to ruin... Is that true?" My heart sank. "She stole my college refund, Aunt Miriam. $75,000. She forged my signature." There was a long silence, then a trembling inhale. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She believed me, but not everyone did. Over the next 2 hours, 4 more relatives called, some confused, some concerned, some angry and defensive on my mother's behalf. They asked questions. They made assumptions. They repeated things she had told them. She said you're being manipulated. She said you're misunderstanding everything. She said she only tried to help. She said you're blowing things out of proportion. She said you're attacking your own family. Each call drained me. Some ended peacefully, others ended with strained silence or abrupt goodbyes. One ended in tears, mine, not theirs. But through the chaos, one constant emerged. Dara. She called and texted repeatedly, checking on me, updating me, reassuring me. When some relatives pushed her for answers, she didn't back down. She explained what my mother had done, showed them the documents I'd gathered, played the recorded clips if necessary. She defended me unapologetically, standing firm in the truth even when others didn't want to hear it. And slowly, the tide shifted. 2 cousins texted to apologize. An uncle sent a quiet message saying he supported me. A family friend reached out with sympathy. Not everyone believed me, and not everyone wanted to be involved, but the silence began to break. Meanwhile, Rena worked behind the scenes. She filed the formal complaint. She worked with the college's legal department. She spoke with investigators. She compiled the timeline and evidence. She kept me updated with every development. Her messages were calm, methodical, steady, anchors in the emotional chaos. Your case is progressing. The financial discrepancies are documented. The forged authorization is significant. We have strong grounds. The district attorney's office is reviewing it. I never imagined my life would intersect with legal language like this. That words like fraudulent, misappropriation, recovery, and charges pending review would ever be associated with the woman who raised me, but here I was, living in the center of it. A few days later, the second email came from the college. The refund had been issued. Direct deposit confirmed. When I saw the money in my account, when the numbers appeared in black and white, I felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. After everything, after the chaos and grief and betrayal, the refund was finally where it belonged. But even that victory was bittersweet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I simply stood there staring at the screen, my emotions too tangled to unravel. Relief, grief, anger, sadness, all of it swirling together. I had the money back, but I had lost something far larger, and beneath all the relief there was the looming shadow of what came next. Because now that the financial portion was resolved, the legal portion would escalate. Investigations, hearings, court dates, consequences. My mother wasn't just facing my anger anymore. She was facing the law. I spent the next several days preparing, gathering documents, responding to Rena's messages, ignoring the occasional hostile text from relatives siding with my mother. I tried to stay focused, but fear crept in at night, whispering doubts, tugging at my resolve. Still, I pushed through. I had come too far to stop now. Finally, the day came, the sentencing hearing. The moment everything would come to light, formally and irrevocably, I walked into the courthouse with Rena beside me, my pulse loud in my ears, my palms damp. Family members sat in the gallery, some supportive, some judgmental, some simply curious. My mother sat at the defendant's table, her expression unreadable. I thought I was ready. I thought nothing could shake me anymore. But what happened at the sentencing hearing was something I never expected. When my mother faced the judge, her mask finally cracked, and so did something inside me. Walking into the courtroom felt like stepping into the heart of a storm, quiet, tense, electrified. I could hear the hushed murmurs of relatives scattered across the benches behind me, some there to support me, others simply there out of morbid curiosity, and a few, I knew, still clinging to the version of events my mother had fed them. But I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes forward. This wasn't about them. Rena walked beside me, her presence steady and grounding. As we approached the front, I saw my mother seated at the defendant's table. She wore a stiff blazer, her hair pulled back tight, posture perfect, controlled, always controlled. But her eyes betrayed something different, anxiety, maybe even fear, though she tried to hide it beneath that familiar polished veneer. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. My mother sat rigidly, but her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. For a moment I felt a strange pang in my chest. something between grief and recognition. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't all-powerful. She was just a woman, a deeply flawed woman, finally being held accountable. The judge began reviewing the case, document by document, hearing it aloud. Every detail, every piece of evidence, every moment of betrayal was surreal. Like listening to someone narrate a story I had lived through but hadn't fully processed. The forged digital signature, the misdirected refund, the unauthorized access, the prior incidents involving relatives, the recorded confrontation at my door. Each fact was laid out with clinical precision, and each one made my mother flinch slightly, as though each truth chipped away at her facade. Finally, the judge looked directly at her. "Ms. Melling, the evidence shows a clear pattern of financial manipulation and unauthorized control over accounts that did not belong to you. This is not a single lapse in judgment. This is a repeated behavior." My mother's mask cracked. Her lips trembled, her shoulders curled, and suddenly she wasn't the iron-willed woman I had grown up fearing. She was someone unraveling. "I only wanted control," she blurted, voice breaking. "She can't manage her own life. She never could. If I didn't step in, she would have ruined everything. Again." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. I felt my breath catch. Not because her words hurt, they were echoes of things she'd said my entire life, but because of the raw desperation behind them. The judge held up a hand, silencing her. "Ms. Melling," he said firmly, "control is not a justification for fraud." She collapsed into sobs, not graceful or calculated, but jagged and guttural. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Her hands shook violently. She didn't look at me, didn't try to explain herself to me. She cried as if the courtroom itself were punishing her. And in that moment, I understood something painful and liberating all at once. She never saw me as an adult. Not at 20, not at 30, not at 50, and maybe she never would. The judge glanced at me briefly before continuing. "Given the extent of the misconduct and the impact on the victim, this court orders restitution to be repaid in full. Additionally, financial monitoring is mandated for any account under Ms. Melling's name for the next 5 years." My mother whimpered, covering her face with her hands. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Hale, the court acknowledges you as the rightful recipient of the refunded amount. You have full legal ownership without contest." I nodded, my throat tight. Hearing it formally stated, acknowledged, validated, lifted a weight I'd been carrying for months, maybe years. Rena whispered, "It's done." But it wasn't just the money, it was the truth. Spoken aloud, recorded, recognized. No more gaslighting, no more minimizing, no more being told I imagined things. The judge allowed me a moment to speak, if I wished. My legs felt heavy as I stood, but Rena gave me an encouraging nod. "I don't want vengeance," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want accountability. I want her to stop hurting people. I want the cycle to end." My mother's sobs quieted for a moment, but she didn't lift her head. "I hope," I continued softly, "that this forces change, for both of us." I sat back down, heart pounding. After the final statements, the judge adjourned the hearing. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, echoing through the chamber like a final severing of ties. As people began to rise, I remained still for a moment, letting the reality settle. Relief washed over me, slowly, carefully, followed by grief, then a surprising sense of release. Dara was the first to reach me. She wrapped her arms around me tightly, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." I closed my eyes, letting her support hold me steady. Around us, relatives murmured, some offering quiet apologies, others avoiding eye contact altogether. It didn't matter anymore. Their opinions no longer defined me. Outside the courthouse, sunlight warmed my face. It felt like the first real light I'd felt in months. I breathed it in deeply, savoring the sensation of space expanding around me, space I hadn't known I was missing. The refund was mine again, legally, irrevocably, a symbol of a future reclaimed. A few weeks later, after the whirlwind of filings and statements and emotional recovery, I made a decision. I enrolled in the next semester's classes, determined to finish what I had started. The refund would help fund my education. Not a burden, not a mistake, but a step toward the life I wanted to build. And with each passing day, I felt the old patterns, the guilt, the control, the fear, loosening their grip, breaking apart, reforming into something stronger, a new beginning. Dara stayed beside me through all of it, checking on me, reminding me to rest, insisting I didn't carry everything alone. Her presence helped me heal in ways I didn't fully understand until later. In time, I spoke with the court again, clarifying that I didn't wish for the harshest punishment. I wanted boundaries, not destruction. Accountability, not revenge. Because I realized something crucial. I wasn't fighting her anymore. I was fighting for me. When I left the courthouse for the final time, walking down the steps with my head held higher than it had been in years, something shifted deep inside me. Something opened. Something finally let go. I was free. Free from the narrative she wrote for me. Free from the guilt I carried. Free from the belief that my worth depended on her approval. And as the wind brushed past me, warm and steady, I understood the truth I'd been searching for all along. And that was the moment I understood. Reclaiming the money wasn't nearly as important as reclaiming myself.